Welcome to Listening to Paint Dry with Mike and Dan, a podcast about the art and hobby of miniature painting. I'm Mike.
And I'm Dan. Today we're going to discuss how we gain inspiration for creating bases and dioramas. And if you hear it in the background, that's my next door neighbor mowing his lawn. So Mike, where do you get your inspiration for making your bases and dioramas?
On August 31st, 1888, around 3:40 a.m., the body of Mary Nichols was found, beginning a 10-week reign of terror in London's East End by one of the most infamous serial killers in history. Known to the world as Jack the Ripper, the murderer set off a chain of events that would change the world as it was known back then and still reverberates to this day. There is a consensus that there are 5 canonical victims: Mary Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Kelly. All 5 women lived in London's Whitechapel and due to desperate times had resorted to prostitution to survive.
Whoa, Mike, what in the world are you talking about? This isn't a true crime podcast. Our listeners want to know how to be better, braver, and happier painters. So what's going on?
Well, Dan, we both love horror, true crime, and there is absolutely a tie-in with our hobby. But let me finish, and I think you'll see where I'm going.
Okay, I'll give you a couple minutes.
The East End of London was not the best place to live in 1888. Up until around 1888, London was a center of global economic power. Competition, however, was now rising from places like America and Germany, and these began to undermine London's power and finances. The start of this economic decline caused mass unemployment, and it was felt hardest in places like Whitechapel, the setting for the Jack the Ripper murders. Life became a daily battle for survival, according to Richard Jones in his book, The Jack the Ripper Casebook. Drunkenness, violence, and sexual abuse were common occurrences in London's worst slums. Add to it darkened streets and lower police presence, and you have a recipe for a serial killer.
Oh, that's so gloomy.
Well, it kind of is, and it kind of sets up that conversation about atmosphere and miniature painting and such along those lines. While it was a terrible place to live, it certainly is an interesting way to create a diorama, especially if you think about things like, if you've ever heard the phrase "by the gaslight" or things along those lines, that is from that time period because the lights were were used fueled by natural gas, etc. And let's just say they did not provide the largest or best amount of lighting for anything.
Yes, so yes, as hobbyists, we do see that, and it does transcend the conversation, but sets the scene, especially when you're looking at that kind of thing where you want to try to portray that, and we do translate that into our art.
One of the things also with it is like good OSL is one of those things that's considered the pinnacle of our skill sets, right? If you can master kind of the way a direct light source bounces off of something, then it opens the doorway to telling a story, giving an atmosphere to a miniature, etc. And it's something that every miniature painter, I believe, should strive to paint because, things are so different under different light settings, and the world of object source lighting teaches you not just how that light itself reflects off, but kind of how to paint it and how colors interact with each other and interact with light, etc. It's interesting. One of the things I always think about is the scene where, and if you have not, this is a spoiler alert, this is a Game of Thrones reference to the last season of Game of Thrones, so if you're not caught up on it, you need to plug your ears or skip ahead 15 seconds. But the scene where Arya kills the Night King, he's purple. There is no blue in him whatsoever. But all the other pictures, and that's just because of the lighting and the situation, etc. And that scene always struck me because I know that he's like an ice blue color, but there was no ice blue whatsoever in it. And I always think about that when I think about how light interacts and how darkness interacts with colors.
Yeah, and if you watch some, old shows, or if you're looking at some TV specials, especially about Jack the Ripper and that whole mythos there, it's always really, really dark. And the only thing you can see are the oil lamps that are lit, or you see the Bobby that's running around, blowing his whistle or something. And if there is some action, you don't see anything at all. You might see some shadows, you might see some reflections, but that's all you see. And that's that dreary atmosphere, which is actually pretty cool. It it does tell a story, and when you do that with your miniatures, especially with big dioramas, you're telling that story. And it takes a little, well, for me, it would take an awful lot of skill and many decades of practice to try to get that down. But hey, that's why we're here.
Right, exactly. One of the things that comes to mind is back in earlier episodes, episode 3, the lighting and the atmosphere of Michael Proctor's diorama was kind of had that same feel. It was dark in parts and lighter in the areas, like kind of helps draw your eyes to certain places, etc. So that's always one diorama that I look at for inspiration. It actually does kind of have a Jack the Ripper 1888 feel to the way this thing is set up and the way it actually looks. But let me do a little bit more on Jack the Ripper, just because of how much I love the time period. Not the Jack the Ripper, because he's a murderer, but kind of let's do the who were the 5 main suspects, and I want to get your opinion, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go right ahead.
All right, so one of the main suspects we have is Montague John Druitt. He was an Oxford educated person. He seemed to be a fairly good family man, but he was also deemed to be sexually insane, like you are if you're a serial killer, right? And also he actually committed suicide in November of 1888, which would coincide with the timing of the end of Jack the Ripper's reign too. So that was pretty interesting. I thought another famous one is Triple H, but not the WWF Triple H or WWE Triple H, but H.H. Holmes from the United States. There was a lot of people who thought that the guy who created the murder house, was also Jack the Ripper. Now the most recent DNA one that's come up. So scientists had collected some form of DNA on a scarf, and they believe that DNA matches the heritage of Aaron Kosminski, he was actually one of the main Ripper suspects at the time. I believe he was also known as Leather Apron, because he was a butcher. He had a bloody leather apron. So if he were to kill somebody and walk around with a bloody apron, people wouldn't be suspect him of anything, because he was a butcher. So he would have a bloody apron. But now they're saying that they found this DNA on the scarf, and they did tests on it and mitochondrial stuff. But there's a lot of debate about mitochondrial DNA. Can it actually pinpoint somebody, or can mitochondrial DNA only exclude people, etc.? Who knows, right? I think we're never going to solve this. And the last one I'll talk about is Walter Sickert. Now, this one was kind of a bit of a controversial one, because this is the suspect that Patricia Cornwall, who's a famous crime novelist, she believed he was the killer. And in the process of doing her investigation, she purchased a Sickert painting. Walter Sickert was a painter from the time period. And one of the things that made her very suspicious was that he has several paintings depicting the Jack the Ripper murderers that are somewhat accurate to the crimes, and she believed have information about the crimes in the pictures that weren't released to the public. I don't know how she could possibly know that, but hey, it is what it is. So she bought a painting, and because artists at those type of canvas artists and stuff used whatever they had in their means, there was a belief that there was some form of DNA in one of his paintings. And so they did find some DNA, ran the mitochondrial test, and she believes that result was conclusive that it would be Walter Sickert as the killer. Again, it runs into the same problems as the Kaminsky ones, because it's mitochondrial DNA, but also Sickert has their issues to whether or not Sickert could have been the killer because of his location, etc., things along those lines. Where back in those days, they didn't have like Facebook check-ins, and so it couldn't be like, hey, in the East End of London, hooking up with somebody, or selfies with the victims, etc. So none of that technology was available. So was there ever a suspect that you read about? Because I know you're interested in this time period too. Was there ever a suspect that stood out to you?
Oh, I really do like the idea of H.H. Holmes. I know that, well, I don't know, but I don't suspect that he actually is Jack the Ripper. But I do like the the theory surrounding it, because he was a pretty miserable person here in the States, and they have some time correlations and that sort, but it's kind of neat. I believe it's Prince Albert in a can, because well, there's a couple reasons, and we know that the royal family will do what they can to save their family name. I'm not going to say Epstein killed himself, but you know what I'm talking about.
I don't think there was a Jack the Ripper. I think there are a few of these murders that are connected, but I think that Jack the Ripper was solely a creation of the London media, and they were writing the letters. They were, and I even think one of the people writing the letters committed a crime in order to keep the stories going, because that's what that place was like in the 1880s. Was that it was just they were sensationalism in journalism. I'm not sure if it would be, I don't know if technically it would be classified as yellow journalism or if that was just a U.S. phenomenon, but it was certainly, if you thought the Weekly World News was bad now, back in those days, the National Enquirer and such have got nothing on those newspapers, and they were just manufacturing stories. Jack the Ripper had a nice ring to it, I don't know. It just doesn't, there's just no link. And, here's one of my biggest ones for it. So one of the murder victims, there was an anti-Semitic phrase written on the wall above her. And if that criminal, if the murderer did that, then that just completely blows any form of MO, right? If only one victim had some anti-Semitic writing on the wall, I think that kind of destroys a lot of the MO and uniformity. There's all those differences in the cases. I think there were probably some of the murders were committed by the same person, but I don't think that Jack the Ripper killed 5 individuals. Well, maybe, I guess, in a sense, the media creation kind of did. That concept of a Jack the Ripper was an overarching boogeyman as opposed to, I think, a real life person. But
that's pretty bold. That's a bold statement, man.
But, and that's where we run into the issue with it, right? Is that the crime happened so long ago. Police technologies were so bad back in the day. I mean, they washed crime scenes before their crime scene investigators got there. And so there's just no way I can't even imagine, absent time travel, there actually being a way to solve this crime. You know what I mean? And so I think that most of the evidence out there, old, degraded, interpreted, reviewed, all that stuff by now has degraded and been embellished upon. And so they can't even guarantee that the scarf that they did the mitochondrial DNA test from was from a Jack the Ripper crime scene. But a guy spent a ton of money buying the scarf in order to do the test. So, and Patricia Cornwall, how much money she spent, I don't remember what the dollar amount she spent on the Walter Sickert painting, but I'm sure that was at least a couple $100,000, if not more. So, money talks in these situations, and a DNA person probably isn't going to come back and give a bad answer to somebody who just dropped a couple $100,000 on a DNA test. You know what I mean? So, but that's just the way I am. But anyways, we can do a bit of a tie-in now, because this is actually where one of the reasons why I want to do this is because it is August 31st is when this episode comes out, and that was when the first victim was found. And both of us being horror buffs and fans of kind of this genre of stuff, is a perfect opportunity to talk about anything from dioramas to styles and techniques of painting to also miniatures and board games. And I was going to list out, if you're okay with that, a few of the major board games that are out there that feature Jack the Ripper.
Sure, as long as they tell me who did it.
I don't know if they ever will tell you who did it. The first, kind of the big one out there, which is a recent game by Fantasy Flight Games, is called Letters from Whitechapel. Now, I just purchased this game from Miniature Market. I have not received it yet. I'll probably do a review of it later down the road. But it is not a miniatures board game unless you buy the expansion pack. You will get the expansion pack has miniatures for the first game. So, of course, I had to buy the expansion pack as well. And so I'll definitely let people know. But basically, the concept like all of the concepts of these games is one person plays as Jack the Ripper and the other players try to catch them and stop them from. It's a turn-based game. Seems very cool. I've watched a few videos on how to play it online, so I'm definitely looking forward to playing it. Another one is from back in 1983, which is just called Jack the Ripper, the board game, and that's the same exact concept. And so a lot of these have the same concept of it, that somebody plays as Jack the Ripper, and it's the goal of the other players that it's kind of a one versus a co-op where they try to collaborate and stop Jack from killing again. Now, one of my favorite things, and I've read so many different variations of stories kind of like this, because there's also some fan fiction out there about it, but there are a lot of people who have written stories about Sherlock Holmes trying to find Jack the Ripper, which is a fantastic idea. Also, I believe it fits into my narrative that Jack the Ripper is fiction, but that's besides the point. I think the murders happened, but I don't think it was Jack.
Didn't they do a movie? Isn't there a movie about that somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, there's several of them movies about him about Sherlock Holmes versus Jack the Ripper.
Oh, okay.
There's a board game by Asmodee called Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, Jack the Ripper and the East End Adventures. That I don't know, that I've been trying to find more information out about that game, but there hasn't been a ton that came up.
Because Jack the Ripper running around killing women is an adventure.
Yeah, I wouldn't consider it an adventure either, right?
Okay,
all right. It's kind of messed up. And that's one of the things I wanted to be careful about with this episode, because I didn't want to celebrate Jack the Ripper because, if Jack the Ripper was real, he was a murdering bastard, and, may he rot in hell, where one of his letters is from. And the name of a movie, I believe. So that's what I want. I didn't want to focus on that aspect of it. I'd rather celebrate the lives of the victims, or say, hey, the victims are cool, and this guy sucked. Anyways, miniatures wise, actually, I was quite surprised at how many miniatures are out there of Jack the Ripper, and these are just a few off the top of my head. Scale 75. And Heroes and Villains, Scale 75 has their historical time period miniatures, and they have a 75 millimeter Jack the Ripper. Heroes and Villains has an amazing Jack the Ripper bust, very spooky. Doesn't look like it has an identity. A lot of these busts come with their face covered. Mythical World Miniatures has a Jack the Ripper bust, but they kind of take a demonic approach to him, where he's like kind of turning into a demon as he's getting ready to kill. Reaper has one sculpted by Gene Van Horn. The company Realms of Terror has one for its miniature game called West Wind. And North Star Steampunk has one. I mean, we can go on forever and ever. And I believe there's a new board game called Ascension coming out, where you can play as Jack the Ripper as you try to get out of Dante's Rings of Hell. So there's a lot going on there. So talk to me a little bit. You had one of the reasons you're really interested in this stuff is because of the macabre. So
yeah, well,
let you segue into that.
Yeah, so with Jack the Ripper and being in the late 1800s, early 1900s, it starts to and having that the mythos and the mysterious about and the mystery of Jack the Ripper. To me, it started to bring about the ideas of, or the theory or fact of the Cthulhu mythos that's out there, and that kind of brings to me kind of the same kind of ideas when it comes to art. You were talking about lots of different miniatures. I'm not even going to get into the mythos at all. That's another 500 episode series. So if you're curious, it's CTHULHU, and that will put you on another path out there in the interwebs for all of our listener. But actually, the idea of it does have some really cool ideas for games. So the Lovecraftian ideas and his mythos and his writings do bring about some really cool sci-fi, fantasy, horror games. So my list is not nearly as detailed as yours, Mike, but there are a lot of really cool games out there, and lots of companies that produce figures. Now, in my searching, and through 3D printing, there happens to be a surge in this because, I guess licensing, if there is even a licensing issue with Lovecraftian stuff, but people are able to get and sculpt 3D art, and you're able to print those, and that's really big. But there are still some companies out there that do produce or did produce miniatures for this game. Let's see. Rumor has it that GW did some long time ago. Probably can find one or two of them out there. But they also did like fantasy westerns, and they did Lord of the Rings and some other things. So back in the early 80s, mid 80s, they were reaching out like they are nowadays with licensing agreements and that sort, which is kind of cool. Fantasy Flight Games has a couple of things, some tie-ins here and there. Black Cat Basics does some stuff. Reaper Miniatures, they always have some really cool ideas and some sculpts, and you can always find some Cthulhu based or the Lovecraftian pulp-ish type of figures in there. Oh my gosh, so much stuff. Scribber, which I really like. WizKids Games did some stuff. North Star did some also. They have the horror range, and it looks like they had a Dracula game too. So yeah, you can have Cthulhu, and you can have Dracula, and you can have Jack the Ripper. And I'm pretty sure that Jack the Ripper and Dracula had some crossover somewhere in a comic book or a movie somewhere.
Oh, good Lord, I'm positive, yeah.
Yeah, it's got to. Etsy, you can find some really cool stuff too. So if you're looking to do, I don't know, you want a scarf or something, or socks, sweater, has Cthulhu stuff on it, or a stuffed critter. There's a lot of those in there too. Another thing is I found a lot recently is crowdfunding. So there's lots of games which we have seen throughout the years of games being created through Kickstarter. So there's quite a few of those also. Deep Madness is one. The Ancient Evil is another one. Cthulhu, let's see. H.P. Lovecraft, The Dreams in the Witch House miniatures set. Looks kind of cool. It's got some neat stuff in there. So you go into Kickstarter, you support them. They'll either send you, with all these, either the figures that are already produced, or they will send you your 3D STLs. So you can print those all yourself, and you can have a whole army of Cthulhu stuff. Yeah, so I'm gonna just end there because I'm just not nearly as prepared as Mike is, and with the Cthulhu stuff, because I didn't want to go into it too deep, because I want to talk about painting, and I don't want to talk about figures of things.
Well, now, okay. There are two you're missing. The two that you're definitely missing. One is the Mythical World Miniatures and Hammerlock Games, same company. They're both that company produces Cthulhu stuff on Kickstarter all the time. The second thing is the Simon game, Cthulhu Death May Die, with the the 13-inch tall, the first X amount of backers had available to get that huge Cthulhu. Yeah. And Reaper, you're right about the Reaper. Reaper has an enormous Cthulhu as well. Which,
like I said, I didn't want to tell all of them out there. If people are interested, all you have to do is type it in, do a search, and you'll find all kinds of really, really cool stuff, at least the figures themselves. And being able to use those figures in your tabletop gaming, even being specifically for those games like Death May Die, or any other game. And
you just want people to go down the rabbit hole.
Go down the rabbit hole, people. I've been swimming in the rabbit hole, the bottoms of the rabbit hole, for all kinds of things in the last week. It's your turn. Look up strange things.
But you do have to take Lovecraftian lore with a grain of salt. And I think a lot of people kind of forget about this when they talk about Cthulhu and stuff like that.
No, we don't want to go down that route.
No, we have to. I feel like, just as a mention, and that's it.
Okay.
That I promise. This is all I'll say. That let's just say Lovecraft is known for being racially insensitive, and we can move on from there. But as long as people know that, whatever you decide to read on your or go down the rabbit hole, that's your choice. But I feel like that, even and it's an interesting thing because when I was a member of the Horror Writers Association of America, we had a large group get together and we talked about kind of the influences in horror and the direction it is, and it's background information that you should have because it does change the way that necessarily you read it. At least you go into that understanding. Does that mean people who play Cthulhu games ignore that? No, I don't think that at all. That's not what we're saying. But it's the more you know, the better informed you are. That's fine. I will move on and mention nothing else about it. Except I do want to paint one of those massive Reaper Cthulhus.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. Why not paint them? And you can put some, I don't know, OSL in there somewhere.
Right. Well, here's the thing that now I've read, kind of reading as somebody who wanted to be a horror writer and kind of still dabbles with writing. It's almost like a rite of passage to read Lovecraft. But here's the thing. I don't always feel like when I look at these variations and these Cthulhus out there that these really match. Like, I feel like there's a lot of liberty taken with what Cthulhu looks like versus what Cthulhu is in the actual books. And so it's interesting to me, the whole squid and octopus head thing. Yeah, I get that, but kind of the rest of the way the body is and such, I don't know. I'm not 100% on board with it, but you know what? If it makes people happy, knock yourself out.
Yeah.
But
so we have these, I think, very, very fringe kind of games and ideas. I mean, I guess we could probably throw, well, I wouldn't say, what is it, Vampire Masquerade. I don't think we would throw that one in there as a far fringe game and stuff. But these are out there. I mean, you have to kind of be looking for those. You're already into it. You don't just start off playing Jack the Ripper kind of video type of board games or Lovecraftian stuff. But are there any that you can think of that kind of use that mythos and kind of use those ideas that are a little bit more central and are available to regular gamers?
Well, I don't know if the mythos per se, but they're in certainly the same
within the same universe.
Yeah, I mean, you could call them boutique style horror games.
Okay.
Like I would say Malifaux.
Okay,
would
that's
be
a good one.
Place. Yeah, and if you like your macabre horror mixed with Japanese hentai, then Kingdom Death would be a good place to go. Those are the two main ones that I can think of as far as horror genre go. And I like Malifaux, and Malifaux is a very interesting operating system. The miniatures are gorgeous, but they make me want to break things when I try to put them together because they are so fiddly.
Yeah. True 28 millimeter children is pretty darn painful to put together.
Well, and you got to look up the instructions because they don't come with instructions. And there are things like this thorn brother and sister that I bought that have all these vines. Like, I cannot this day figure out, even with the downloaded instruction, which vine connects to what vine and how it's supposed to look. And I mean, mine looked like a third grader put them together. And actually that's a shame because a third grader probably would put them together better than I did, But they do have some, like, if you can get them together, they do make gorgeous miniatures. They are a lot of fun to paint once they're actually together. I know, like, I have one that's based off of the John Henry lore called Neil Henry, and I enjoyed the hell out of painting that miniature. It's kind of a, 35 cents a day for driving steel, but it was a great miniature. That one was an easy one to put together, but everything else I put. One of the sets I got was in translucent plastic with my eyeballs. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have to spray paint these. I'm going to have to prime these on sprue just so I can see what that is. That an arm, a leg? Is that somebody's tongue? Because it could very well be a tongue in Malifaux or in Kingdom Death. So,
yeah. Well,
but it's
like,
also.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no! I was just going to say Malifaux is interesting, and if you're tired of bored of kind of just rolling dice, Malifaux uses playing cards as the mechanic for the game, and so it's very different, a different feel to it than, let's say, a shoot 'em up, bang up game per se. Now it's still a combat game, etc. But I really found that mechanic neat when I did a demo game last year at the Nova Open with somebody who was in the finals of the Malifaux tournament. So that was pretty cool. You know, we're through the kind of the Jack the Ripper, the Cthulhu madness. What do you got working on your table right now? What are you working on?
Well, let's see. I'm still painting my Indominus guys. I still have 12 Sisters of Battle heads sitting in a jar on my desk. So I'm still staring at them, not doing a whole lot with them.
Now, let me ask, is that
Yes.
kind of like, do you have that jar set up kind of like the Governor and the Walking Dead, where you have those jars ahead? Are they each in their individual head floating in liquid?
They're in a jar to remind me that someday I need to paint them.
Well, that's nowhere near as interesting. They each need an individual jar.
Well, they're pretty small because they're true 28 millimeter. Pretty smart jars. Of course, I have my BattleTech stuff that is sitting around waiting for me to paint them so that they can go out to the field of battle and blow each other up. And so table-wise, that's pretty much it. I've been a slowdown recently because I haven't been feeling very well. It's not the COVID thing. It's just lots of work stuff going on, lots of bugs and germs besides COVID. So I've been a little off. So I haven't been doing a whole lot of painting, but I have been doing some research and taking notes on certain things, getting back into my music, which means no money for paints and figures, but a little bit more money for my record collection and some Wi-Fi or hi-fi music stuff. So that's kind of it. Now, I did receive, surprisingly, a Kickstarter box from months ago from Game Envy, and it's their Desk Wizard. So I got the 10 and the 14. Don't know what those mean. Probably the number of holes, but I never really counted them. You put them together. It's black acrylic. Pretty cool. You can get multiple colors, different kinds of colors. I set mine up. It took me about a half an hour, and I'm actually pretty excited about it. The holes are generic size, so you can put your GW stuff. You can put Vallejo drop bottles in. You can put some larger bottles in there, some that you would buy like Cracker Barrel paints, apple paints, and the barrel, whatever those apple barrel paints or whatever they're called, the craft paints. I think those might fit in there also.
That's impressive. That was a fast turnaround.
It was very, very fast. I think they had the designs pretty much ready to go. They just wanted to get them out, but they were pretty cool. They have lots of holes for paintbrushes, which I think is awesome. You can use them right side up or upside down. You can use your dropper bottles. So there's lots of holes where you can put paintbrushes for paintbrush holders, which are pretty cool. There's a stand where I can put my tablet, which is definitely really awesome. I can also use my additional stand for, you can put them on the walls and things like that. It's a neat piece. Is it something that I would use like forever? I'm not sure. I did replace something that I had with the new Desk Wizard, just because it helped organize things, and I use black and orange because those are my favorite colors, so it matches my red grass
Wet
thing
palette?
that put water. Yeah, wet palette. Yes, I'm a lack of words, so
We're almost there, man. We're at the finish line.
I know. I don't know how you're going to cut this stuff up, or if I should just start over again. So yeah, that's about it. I'm waiting for a couple other things to come in, Kickstarter wise, but yeah, it's been kind of slow on the hobby side of things, just because work is picking up, school's picking up for most of us in the country, and people's going batty and crazy out there. So what about you, Mike? What you got going on?
I'm gonna go in reverse order to piggyback off of your Kickstarter. I received a package too for a Kickstarter for Tego Miniatures, the Succubus. I was actually surprised at how I got a shipping notice last week, And then boom, it came the following week, which is unusual because it was from Italy. Usually, when with from stuff from Europe, it takes 2 to 4 weeks to get here once it's been shipped, and so that was pretty cool. I got the gaming size. It came. I bought a paint set and some paint brushes and a couple other little add-on things. I'm not going to go into too much detail about it because I'm going to do a review of it. I will say it is an impressive miniature, and I wish I got the bigger version, but that's okay. You know, such is life. It's what budgets dictate, etc. But I'll definitely we'll have a review out of this the following week, so that way people can hear about it. And it's Tago Collectibles used to be Kabuki. I did one of theirs also in the past for Lady Mechanicus and Tesla, which I absolutely love. And one of these days, I swear to God, I'll paint it. But anyways, I've always enjoyed their miniatures. They've done a good job with them, so I was excited to receive that. Now I have kind of ventured like acquisition wise. I typically order paintbrushes. Like when I order Rosemary and Company paintbrushes, I order through Wind River Arts, which is a U.S. based, actually the only real U.S. based distributor of Rosemary and Company brushes. And I accidentally ordered a Series 8 size 3 the last time I ordered, and it was fantastic. And I actually was like, wow, this is a great accident. So I ordered, this time I called back and I ordered a 0, 1, 1 and a 2 of them. Loving them. If you are a Raphael fan, this is a pretty good substitute for a Raphael 8404s. They are not as they're not as stiff as like as a Bombwick Igniter or a Windsor Newton Series 7. They have the fatter belly on them, a little bit of longer points on them. So I'm actually been very pleased with them. But while I was on the phone with them, the owner convinced me to also try the Rosemary and Company Series 22, which is even a little bit of a longer point on it. And I've got to tell you, I did eyes on a miniature with this, and it's the first time I've ever done, and this is a size 2 brush, I've ever done eyes. The first time, both eyes, one shot, had paint, didn't have to go, oh crap, the paint's already dried, let me press a little harder. Oh, I just filled the entire eyeball with black. So it was nice because it's got a fatter belly on it. It held the paint wet. It held the paint wetter than it normally. I don't even know if that's the wet way to say it. The paint stayed wet a little bit longer than it normally does, so I appreciated that. So if you've tried the Series 33 Rosemary and Company brushes, I would strongly suggest trying the Series 8 and the 22s. Those are wonderful as well. So that's kind of acquisition wise what I've gotten. I've gotten a few paints here and there, but nothing besides the Green Stuff World paints that came with the Succubus set, which we'll talk about at a later date. I have decided to bite the bullet, try non-metallic, like commit to non-metallic metal, and doing freehand on a miniature. I'm painting a Sequitur Prime from the Push Fit Models GW box set, and it's actually going a hell of a lot better than I ever imagined it would. Now, I've tried NMM in the past, and I've given up after like trying one plate of armor, and I kind of like, give up, paint it over with metallic paints. This time is my first, and we'll post pictures of it where it is. It's not completed, but the first time I've ever committed to, I'm not going to do anything else until this miniature's done. And I've painted all of the NMM, and I'm not giving up. I'm not, even no matter what it looks like, I'm not giving up. So you've seen it. I think it's turning out okay. The freehand is turning out even better than I ever imagined it would. Basically, I've shaved off the shield. The shield of this model came with pre-designed on it, and so in order to do the freehand on the shield, I sanded that all off to make it flat and painted my own design on the shield. So that stuff has been coming along really, really well. That's the main focus. I'm also working on a side project. Dutch Adams, who owns Crimson Fields Gaming, asked me to, he had bought his wife a Haggard and Fang, and he asked me to paint them for him. In exchange, he's hooked me up with some Indominus miniatures. So that's another project I'm working on. I'm not posting pictures of that because I want it to be a surprise for him when he sees it. So, but that's kind of what's on my table. Been enjoying, actually, I have painted every day for the last 2 weeks for at least an hour. So I've been I haven't done that in a long time, and it feels really good. And I actually can feel like each time I pick up the paintbrush, I'm a little bit better. Not a lot, but a little bit.
And I'm there with you. For the last 2 weeks, I've thought about painting, but I haven't touched anything.
Oh man, but during this quarantine, I have been terrible about picking up a paintbrush. I've done everything but for most of the time. Like, oh, let me see about cleaning up all these miniatures instead of doing that. Oh, let me organize my painting area. Oh, let me do some research. Oh, let me do this. Let me do that. Oh, there's a video game with my name on it. Oh, I can go to bed early. Oh, I want to watch this new TV show. And it's just not, I've done everything but paint. So except for like the last 2 weeks where I've seriously kind of committed to painting. And damn, it feels good. It's, there's been a few times I had to force myself. Like 2 nights ago, I said, I'm putting the timer on for 1 hour. Pick up a paintbrush. You got your palettes ready to go. Just go and paint. And so inevitably I had to get up and realize that I didn't have water to rinse my brush out,
Good job.
Hey,
That's
but hey,
I lick the brushes.
Yeah, there you go. keep them clean via tongue. Yay. Let's all eat paint. But that's really what's going on in my world. I am, one of the first resin miniatures I ever bought was called the Puppeteer from Mindwork Games. I love, like we've already talked about loving horror, but I love creepy stuff, and this dude is totally creepy. And they are just releasing an updated version of it that is just absolutely insanely epic. And so, yeah, I had to purchase that as well. And so I'm actually going to do the original Puppeteer as my wife wants me to paint a miniature from one of my nieces, and she likes creepy horror stuff. And so I'm going to paint her the original Puppeteer for this Christmas, and then go from there and see if that inspires me to do the bigger one. The bigger one is like an 80 millimeter it's got like 6 figures total with it. It's a whole diorama setup, which is just mind-blowingly amazing.
Hey, well, if this Listening to Paint Dry podcast doesn't take off, maybe we'll just do some like horror stuff or something.
I would be good with having a horror podcast.
A horror painting contest. Today we're going to talk about how to put blood splatter on the wall correctly.
Right. According to the TV show Dexter, blood splatter should do this,
Yeah,
because that's her reference, right? You go to watch Dexter, the TV show, and you learn all about how blood spray is, because that's what his job was, right? He was a blood splatter expert for Miami police.
If your Space Marine has got a chain axe in an orc's head, what color purple do you use for the blood? And I know someone's going to say that Space Marines don't use chains axes. I got it. Chain sword instead. Chaos Space Marine uses a chain axe.
Well, maybe the Space Marine picked up the chain axe because he needed a weapon.
That's heresy.
Would it be heresy?
Yes.
Okay. So they would just rather die than...
Unless he's a dark angel and then just no one knows.
Right, nobody would know, right?
That's a shout out to all you Dark Angel players out there.
It could also be somebody from the Blood Angels Death Company that just doesn't give a crap anymore and is in dying throes killing things, so grabbing anything in their pathway.
Possibly.
They're more likely to just bite your head off, I guess, instead of chainsaw your head. So,
next on listening to people scream while you paint, right. Mike is going to describe the best way to paint blood splatter, and Dan's going to talk about different colored organs. Sounds
like a hit show to me.
Can't do any worse than what we're doing right now, man.
Right, exactly. They say there's no that you can't go downhill. That's correct. We can only go uphill at this point. Right?
That is right. So that's for you one listener, wherever you
right.
are.
For our listener out there.
I think it's Mike's. It's Mike's wife, because my wife won't listen to it.
No, it ain't my wife. My wife hasn't listened to a single podcast of it. All they do is make fun of me when I do the intro. Like, if they've ever heard me do the intro, they all mock me as I'm doing it.
Yep.
And so it's I kind of
Go ahead.
It's hard. It's harsh. Even my 11-year-old gets in on it, and I'm like, "Come on, you're daddy's little girl. You can't gang up on dad like that."
It's an Apple bot that just goes out and finds podcasts that don't have any listeners, and it just automatically taps it so they have at least one.
This one, yeah. Well, no, I do know. We at least have 4 subscribers because I put it on all my in-laws' phones.
Because you, I was saying you paid them, but that's even better.
No. Like, my father-in-law was like, "Hey, let me. I want to do podcasts," and I'm like, "Okay, I'll help you." And of course, I subscribed, download, liked, and wrote a review for us. But and then my mother-in-law wanted it too, and then my brother-in-law and sister-in-law did. I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna keep giving me phones. I'll keep adding our podcast.
This is my favorite podcast from my only son.
Yeah, son-in-law.
Yeah, son-in-law.
Yeah. See, my parents would have never owned smart devices. Like, my dad fought it, wouldn't get, like, he had a flip phone when he passed about 4 years ago, and that was it. That was the highest technological upgrade he was going, refused to get text, so I wouldn't have been able to get the podcast on there. So my mom never owned a cell phone, so, too funny.
But if we could just get a way to push our podcast on beepers, we might be all right.
That would be wonderful.
Or pagers. Beep 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 beep. Oh, a new episode from Listening to Paint Dry with Mike and Dan. Oh, let me go run over to my computer and smartphone and download it. Yeah.
There's several problems with that scenario. I think that would only give us 2 more listeners because there might only be 2 people left with beepers left.
What? Oh my gosh, my pager went off. How'd that happen? Hadn't gone off in 10 years.
Right, exactly.
Oh, my wife is going to be like, what in the world are you guys talking about? Pagers and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Well, on my PDA, which, back in the day, I thought it was public display of affection, but it's, personal. What is it? PDA. What did it stand for? Personal device something? No, I can't.
Is it
I just had it.
Personal digital? So, listener.
Personal digital assistant.
Oh, man, you figured it out. I was going to ask if they knew what it was. But I think you're right. Maybe personal digital assistant? Yeah.
Yep.
That lasted like a whole 3 minutes.
Yeah. Yep. You're right. And I remember somebody saying, "You want my PDA?" And I'm like, what is that? I've got this gray triangular Motorola flip phone. Get your PDA away from me.
All right. So do we have anything else? Or is that about it for us today?
That's about it for us today. But I will say this, if our listeners want to get in contact with it, or our listener wants to get in contact with us, it's listeningtopainttry@gmail.com. And you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook at Listening to Paint Try, as well as on Twitter at Try Painting.
Well, it was kind of interesting that we broached the horror genre and how that basically kind of sort of coincides with our art. Maybe we can go a little bit more detail next time. But maybe we should do something with the sci-fi world now. Besides besides the big one. I mean, we don't really need to talk about GW and how 40K has pretty much dominated the sci-fi gaming and atmospherics and themes and techniques and all that kind of stuff. But maybe there's some other stuff out there that we could talk about.
It's such a ripe area for discussion. Absolutely, we should do sci-fi. We don't even have to talk about Space Marines or anything along those lines from 40K, because there is such a rich amount of material out there. In every scale of model, from 28 millimeter all the way up to 120 millimeter models. There's so much, and that's not even including the world of getting into vehicles and like plastic model kits or Gundam and things along those lines.
Yeah, maybe we'll broach that next time around.
Sounds like a plan.
Cool. All right. Well, if you don't have anything else, then we'll just go ahead and end this episode. So, one last thing is follow your dreams to be a better, braver, and happier painter.
See ya. Listening to Paint Dry with Mike and Dan is a production of LTPTWMD. All rights reserved. No portion of this recording may be used without the express written consent of the host. The music is Death by a Thousand Questions by Springtide. Download from the Free Music Archive on a non-commercial attribution share-alike basis. All views and opinions expressed in the show are solely the views and opinions of the person who said them. All celebrity voices, if any, were impersonated and done so poorly.